Mark Fiorentino, welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here.
Well, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. Why don't you begin? You have a fascinating story to tell. And why don't you begin by giving us a little bit about your background, and we'll go from there.
Well, sure. I can tell you about how I got into the whole thing to start with, which is
Yeah.
basically when I was 10 years old. I was going to catechism, and the nuns asked us to find a saint born on our birthday. So there was no internet way back in 1965. So I went to ask my parents. I went to the calendar eventually, and fortunately, there was a name that was on my birthday of March 14th, and it was Albert Einstein. So I says, well, I don't know who he is, but I'll go look him up and find out, and maybe that's who I'll do the report on. It's not a saint, but what the heck? That's all I could find. So I did look him up in Encyclopedia Britannica, and it was a fascinating story that he had, and his theories just dazzled me, especially the unified field theory, because I remember specifically going to that segment and reading that, and I just sat there and I thought about it, and I says, this is the most sensible thing I've ever heard. This means something. This is important. I want to know this. And so for the rest of my life, it was a hobby at first. Any science fiction TV show, anything about UFOs, anything that might have anything to do with the unified field theory, I was interested in. And I was trying to see a pattern. That's just the way I seem to work. I look for patterns in things. And throughout the years, I did eventually see a very definite pattern. So that's how I got into it. There was other factors along the way, many little stories that happened that got me to think, well, I could possibly solve this problem. And one happened when I was at IBM. I was working in a research lab, a test lab, and there was a co-op student there. His name was Tom. He was doing some work with finite mathematics, which is a strange little branch of mathematics. And he was doing some work in modulo 2, that's binary mathematics. So he's using Boolean types of equations that were logic equations. And he wanted to solve this problem. And it was for his master's thesis. And he had this model he was holding in his hand. He was trying to visualize it. Then he asked me, hey, what do you think about this? This is the problem. I need to generate this special formula. And if I do this, I will get these series of numbers that don't repeat and come up with every possible example, no matter what base we're in. Well, it's base 2, but no matter what dimension we're in. So there's, infinite amount of dimensions. So the equation would have to change after a while. So I looked at the first 3 or 4, I think he had solved, first 4 dimensions, and I saw a pattern in the equation itself. It was forming a geometric pattern. For some reason, he didn't see it. So I says, yeah, I'll take a look at it. Give it to me tonight, and I'll write up a little quick program to test my idea, and in the morning, I'll give you what I got. And that night, I went home and I solved like the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th dimensions within 2 hours. Actually, they got faster and easier to solve each time I would go up, even though the permutations, the amounts were going into the millions of possibilities for the equation. I could just say, well, the next one is going to be this because the geometric pattern is, and for some reason that worked. It doesn't almost, there was no reason why I should think that would be like that. But it is. And so then I gave him the solution the next day, and I says, look at the pattern. Now you can predict the next dimension, what it's going to be, all the way up as far as you want to go. And he took it back to his professor, and his professor said, I said, well, congratulations. It's a great discovery. This isn't in any of the textbooks. This is new math. You discovered something entirely new. And I tried to find out what his application was. I suspect it had something to do with neural networks, because this thing was really like a Hamiltonian circuit, which is, I don't want to get into all of that math, but it was a special kind of mathematics that could be used definitely in computers somehow. But he would never tell me, and I let it go after a while. But I was just thrilled that night when I went to bed, and I realized I discovered new math, and only the greats in mathematics and physics histories get to do that. You don't discover new equations every day. And so I couldn't sleep that night. I was so excited. I was just thrilled that I had done that. And when I did that, I realized, I said, hey, maybe I got a shot at the unified field theory problem. I'll debug it and see if I can find the solution. So that's basically the one. There's another whole story behind that too, is spiritual stuff. But that's basically how I got into it in the first place.
Okay. Now, tell us exactly what this theory is, because most of my audience, and myself included, are not mathematicians. We don't. What is Albert Einstein's unified field theory?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I love that question. Well, to simplify it, it's actually very sensible. All it is electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So, what am I talking about when I say single fundamental field? Back in Einstein's time, they all believed in something called the ether, which was space was made of something. It was an actual substance. And so they went about the task of trying to understand its properties and what this substance, how it worked. So that's the single fundamental field that I used in my theory. So with the ether being the stuff that the other fields are made of, I decomposed, I guess you would say, electromagnetism and brought it back to its two original forces, which is the electrostatic field and the magnetic field. So now we had to unite those three fields together, or gravity being the third field, to be coming from that same fundamental field. So I will say again, electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So what are those three fields that are coming from the fundamental stuff, which is basically a quasi-elastic solid? So that's something you can bend. So the three fields, electrostatic field is a twist of space. That's the deformation, the bend of that type of field. The magnetic field is a reaction to the electrostatic twist as it moves through space. Magnetic field occurs when that is moving and space rotates. So now we have two of the three fields already locked in. We already know that much already. So gravity has to come about through some sort of motion of the electromagnetic field. And that was, I linked through acceleration, which Einstein already knew about. He had an equivalence principle that was basically stating that acceleration and gravity are the same thing. So that's basically Einstein's idea. I just said, you're right. And I extended it a little bit. I got into the details, mechanically speaking, to explain it. So basically, that is Einstein's dream of uniting those three fields coming from one basic field, which is different bendings of that field.
Now, applying that to science, what would be the benefit of knowing what this is? How could we apply it to everyday life, or to my notes say something about anti-gravity principles. Are we talking about creating an anti-gravity machine, things like hovercraft, perhaps, or perhaps being able to create an to create I don't know, artificial gravity somehow in space with I don't, what would be the benefit to mankind of
You
knowing
just want to know the applications,
the
right?
application? Correct.
Yeah, sure. Well, solving this problem is a matter of utmost importance because it's reading the mind of God. I mean, it's knowing His thoughts. To understand the unified field theories, is you understand how God created the universe, how He makes matter equivalent to energy. You understand it all. It's the theory of everything. So basically, the unified field theory is how else can I say? It's the holy grail of physics.
Okay.
Everybody wants to know this. This is vitally important. It's probably one of the most important things that we could learn. It's something that once you learn this and you know this, your species evolves. So now, what are some real practical applications for this, other than knowing about how it works? And it's nice to know, and people are curious, of course. But once I realized that gravity is actually a contraction of space, I realized that if space can contract, but you have to think about the possible ways you can bend space. You can twist it, you can rotate it, you can stretch it, you can contract it. So if I know I already know I can contract it, that means I can expand it. And when you expand space, you invent anti-gravity. So I knew it could be done. I just had to find a mechanical method to do that. So what is the method? It's using magnetism. And how did I know that? Well, when I was a kid reading about UFOs who obviously have mastered anti-gravity because they aren't being propelled by jets or rockets or any ion propulsion system. They're using a spatial bias drive. They're bending space somehow. And how are they doing that? Well, I remember reading as a kid that there was some Air Force investigator that was going out and he was taking a magnometer with him. So what's a magnometer? Magnometer is a device that measures magnetic fields. Why would the Air Force guy be taking a magnometer to UFO landing sites? He knows something. There's no reason for him to pick that over other instruments, let's say like a Geiger counter, which sometimes they also took. And I remember reading that they picked up some grass and measured it and saw that it was magnetic. It was magnetized. The grass was actually magnetized. That takes a tremendously strong magnetic field to do that. So there's the big technology. What I'm saying in my book, and I'm saying right now, is anti-gravity isn't science fiction anymore. And the way to do it is through strong magnetic fields. The UFOs obviously use this, and it's been talked about for many decades now. I'm just saying I know the reason why it works. Because a rotation of space, which is what a magnetic field is, causes space to stretch. You can imagine in your mind when you're, like, let's say a piece of rubber or something, and you twist it. Look at it, you'll see it's stretching. The more you twist, the more it stretches. That's the kind of deformation you need to cause an expansion of that space. So that's the big technology, anti-gravity. We can do, like you say, supercars, the super ambulance, which would be very handy for saving lives. We could build drones to assemble things in outer space, like Project Sunshade, which I talk about in my book. So there's a lot, fabulous applications and technologies that we can build once we have this. So in the last chapter of my book, I basically asked everybody who's a scientist, an engineer, do the experiment for magnetism. Prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that magnetism can be used to block the gravitational field and, in fact, actually be used for propulsion and anti-gravity work.
All right. So obviously, you mentioning UFO technology. You must believe in UFOs.
Yes,
Okay,
of
as
course.
do I. I mean, as do I. You're not finding a negative audience here with regard to UFOs. We're looking for practical applications. Now, if UFOs exist, with which both of us stipulate that they do,
Mhm.
and that we have seen them for, well, it probably goes on for thousands of years, but
Right.
let's just go back. Let's just go back as far as 1947 with Roswell or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Uh, and that these particular aircraft exist and that they use the principles outlined in Einstein's unified field theory for propulsion. And if those of us who are conspiracy theorists believe that they shared this technology with us, or at least with people within the highest rankings of our government during this time, because if you notice, between like 1947 and the mid 1950s, there was an explosion in technology. And so I go under the assumption that they shared some of their technology with us. What When you presented your new mathematical equation to this particular professor or whoever and said, "Well, you've discovered something new," how do we know that some people within the highest levels of our government didn't already know this because of what they learned from these extraterrestrial beings uh, after 1947, and have some of your these principles, including Einstein's unified field theory, already been placed into practice?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's exactly what's happened. Now, Einstein's unified field theory doesn't actually predict anti-gravity. That's where I come in and extended things a little bit.
Okay.
Neither does quantum mechanics. Nobody really predicts anti-gravity or has any solution. This book has that in it. But you're absolutely right in your assumption that, yeah, they either reverse engineered and figured things out, or they were at some point in contact with aliens and they explained to them how it worked. So basically, um, I agree with you that they probably know this stuff that I'm saying right now to some degree, because if they have, in fact, as many people have said, been in contact with and still are in contact with extraterrestrials, they probably know this and they've classified it. Then the question comes in, why classify this knowledge? The answer is really pretty simple. Anti-gravity technology gives the United States government a strategic military advantage. Let's face it, a UFO can fly circles around our fastest jets. I mean, literally. I don't care whether they're going Mach 1, 2, 3. They can fly circles around that jet flying at that speed and have done that.
Right.
So it's almost as if they're saying, look at how inferior you are. We could
Yeah.
literally fly circles around you. So yeah, he who has this technology rules the skies, basically. And it's so secret, it's so above any top secret classification. They won't even use it unless their backs are pinned to the wall. I would imagine at some point they might be tempted to use it, but I suspect that they're doing space missions already. They've been to other stars, because as I get into my book, I explain how not only can you use this for anti-gravity and propulsion, but it enables you to go faster than the speed of light by any amount that you want to. And that's necessary if you're going to fly to other stars. You just can't go at the speed of light. It's just not fast enough. I mean, the nearest star to us is Proxima Centauri, 4.2 light years from here. And that's going to take 4.2 years one way at the speed
Right.
of light. So that's no good. That's not practical. So we have to go thousands of times faster. Obviously, the aliens have succeeded in this. And I imagine we probably have that technology. We're not sharing it at this point.
Um, And for all that you and I know, I mean, because everything is classified, wouldn't it also be possible that what we have been led to believe with regard to what we have accomplished with our space programs and our technology and military technology is only a fraction of what has actually been achieved? There are those who indicate that perhaps we have already visited Venus, Mars. That there are some who are saying that they've seen bases established on other planets. How do we know that we haven't already gone there? And we the American people, and let's face it, people from other countries as well, haven't been told about some things that have already been accomplished.
Yeah, it's frustrating to know that's probably the case. And since the United States government is the authority on this, like it or not, until the authoritative proof arrives from them, they have done a great job of keeping people confused and in doubt about this. Anti-gravity is still thought to be something of science fiction, and
Yeah.
they have allowed that to happen. Meanwhile, physicists not working on Einstein's ideas and have been distracted by quantum mechanics, which is keeping them from moving in the direction of discovering it themselves. Every time somebody discovers that magnetism can be used to interfere with gravity, they make a little bit of a splash, and then all of a sudden they're off the radar. Eugene Pochbanoff and Ling Ning Li are two examples of people who stumbled on magnetism or rotating magnetic fields seems to start to cancel out gravity. And the next thing you know, they're working for Boeing or have a $500,000 transferred into their account, and they don't talk anymore. So they've done a great job of keeping this discovery quiet. This should have been discovered 50 to 70 years ago. And every time somebody stumbles over it, they can never get any traction to get anybody involved in further research, because most scientists will say that's nonsense. Magnetism has nothing to do with gravity, and it dies. So it's a struggle. So I'm trying to get the message out. It's time to take this seriously and prove it once and for all.
Well, and it's interesting that you should say that, because two points come to mind. Number one, we cannot be 100% sure that we in the United States are the only ones who have this technology. I mean, these same extraterrestrial beings might have contacted Russia, they might have contacted Germany, they might have contacted Israel or any of the Middle Eastern countries and given them the same technology. We're assuming we're the only ones that have it, but we don't know. And number two, the resistance that you're indicating from the scientific community may only be a cover. Perhaps they're saying, oh, magnetism has nothing to do with gravity, when in fact they already know that, but they could be sworn to secrecy depending upon who they're working for, correct?
Well, certainly the physicists that are hired by the government. Look, I got a list of companies that are working on anti-gravity projects. It's a long list.
Okay.
There's a lot. Here they are. Bell Aircraft, Boeing Aircraft, Clark Electronics, Convair, Douglas Aircraft, Grumman, Hughes Aircraft, Hiller, Radio Corporation. There's a lot of them. But it's classified. They're not going to talk about it.
Right.
So those physicists are not going to talk about it. They're not going to go to their old college campus and give a lecture on, hey, look at what we've done. We got this thing floating in midair. We're just using magnetism. It's blocked gravity altogether. They would love to do that, but you know what? They could get in a lot of trouble if they do. So they're not talking.
Because the government wants to save it for military applications.
Yeah, but I'm hoping that's changing, because they released the stuff from the Navy on the West Coast, the Tic Tac UFOs. So
yes, they did.
So that's a new kind of kind of thing that's happening. I'm hoping maybe they're getting ready to announcement. I know there was one general that said they had bases on Mars, and that's unusual that a military general would officially say there's bases on Mars. And there's one other thing you said that I think is very interesting and possibly true is that other people may have it. I think China may have
China.
that tech. Why do I say that? Because during the Vietnam War, when we were fighting the North Vietnamese, of course, China was on their side, and our troops encountered UFOs on one of the rivers at night and had a battle with two UFOs, which we took a beating on. And these UFOs fired back by somehow reversing our ordnance as we were shooting at them, and it was being shot right back at us. And troops were lost, and one boat was destroyed, and a missile was launched from us. Somehow it got reversed and hit one of our boats out at sea, and somebody was killed there. So my conclusion from that is, why would the aliens take sides? They possibly, China has the technology, was giving it a little test spin against us. And so I'm thinking maybe China has it. That's my evidence, that particular incident.
No, I think it's. That's the one country I didn't mention, but that is an excellent point that you make, because I think they're the biggest concern that we have right now. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, something I'm not, again. Hopefully, I'm firing on all cylinders when I read feedback to you what you said. You said that it has to do with the twisting and bending of space, correct?
Yes, the
Okay.
different fields, the force
All right.
fields.
Is it possible that if you are be able to bend space, are you somehow able to bend time? Could you have time travel involved with this at all?
Yeah, but it's not. I have a chapter in the book that talks about Stargates, and it's the most speculative chapter in my book because
By the
I've
way,
had
hold up your book. You have your book with you?
yeah, it's right here. It's good thing I have them right next to me.
Okay, good. All right, it's called Master of Reality. I want to make sure that people order your book. I don't want to go the entire interview fascinated by everything you're saying and then not promote the book. So, okay,
Yeah,
so and I'm assuming it's available at all the usual.
Amazon and
Yeah,
my website
excellent.
www.super-relativity.com.
Okay, super-relativity.com, and you have a blog there too. So if you go to
Right.
super-relativity.com/blog, you can get your blogs. I just want to make sure that we get this out there because people are going to be fascinated by this. All right, let's talk a little bit about the most speculative chapter of your book. Talk about Stargates. That fascinates me.
Yeah, oh gosh.
I mean, let's go out there.
There's more out there. How I got into it was basically I was told that I should write this chapter by very wise people. So I said, okay, I'll do that. But at this point, I don't know exactly how they work. But what I'll do is I'm writing a chapter, I'll research, and I was given some keywords to search, and they actually turned up technology that could be used. So from that technology, which is basically fractal lenses, and what's a fractal lens? Well, it's made from a metamaterial. Okay, what's a metamaterial? A metamaterial has properties in it that this is on ResearchGate and places like this, that they construct this material in such a way that they cancel two things that are part of space. And let me tell you what those two things are. They're permittivity and permeability. Now, why are these two things important? Well, the speed of light is determined by this equation discovered by James Clerk Maxwell. The speed of light equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. So those are two properties of space. So this is very important. If you can control these two properties, you can control the maximum speed limit. So the more you reduce permeability and permittivity, the faster you can go.
Mark, tell us about one aspect that we discussed briefly here, and that is the concept of Stargates. That's interesting to me. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, the whole idea came up. Now I'm getting an echo. What is that? Is there a speaker somewhere? All right. Let's start again.
All right, we were talking about Stargates, and all of a sudden we got cut off. But we're back on. You were just beginning to tell us about that. You're someone very wise to you suggested that you put in a chapter in your book about Stargates.
Yeah. So I had some questions about time travel and stuff. I had originally thought that going back in time was not possible. I could see where we could do going forward in time, but I was advised that yes, that you can go back in time, and then I had to do research as to how that might be possible. And the only way that really is possible that we can travel through time and into other dimensions and stuff is that these things are coexisting in parallel. So all of time is occurring at the same moment. And we here physically are in a time segment that's running parallel with an infinite number of other time segments. So that would make it possible to create a portal and jump from one segment to another if you had the right technology and you knew what you were doing. So that's the basic theoretical principle behind creating a Stargate, time travel, interdimensional travel. All of these things are in parallel. So that makes it possible to build a system that can create portals that can jump between one and the other. So when I wrote the chapter on Stargates, I was not sure exactly how to build it. The one thing I knew for sure is that something was going to have to go faster than the speed of light, because in order to adjust the space, bias the space again, you have to accelerate photons to a speed much faster than they normally go, so you can create the electromagnetic shock wave that would come out of the frame that would eventually that would tune the space to a different region, a different dimension, a different time. And I think it's fascinating that if we could do this and we can work out the math and everything, that you could literally adjust the Stargate like you would tune a radio to the place and time that you want to be, which would be very exciting to do. Other than I'm really against going back in time because of the dangers, and it's just not, to me, morally right to do that, to try to change the past. There is some people that claim that that is being done, and I have heard that it is being done once again by the United States, who apparently has this technology. They stumbled over it during their early work with the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project. Now, these are two projects that supposedly did some early time traveling, very limited. The power of this technology was very limited. It was just using magnetic resonant fields, which is now, I think they've evolved beyond that and are going to use are using the technology I described in my book. So I was given some keywords to search on the internet, and they actually turned up a new technology that would do exactly what I said needed to be done in the beginning of the chapter, which is accelerate the photons beyond the speed of light. And that new technology is called fractal lenses. Oh, what's a fractal lens? Well, fractal lens is made out of a material called metamaterial. Oh, what's a metamaterial? A metamaterial is something that material scientists and such have developed now that basically allows you to tune internally to this material the two basic properties of space. Space, the ether, has properties. They're called permittivity and permeability. Now, if you know, see, I'm always looking for patterns and connecting the dots. I say, wait a minute. Permeability and permittivity that these guys have adjusted, there's an equation that describes them. And that equation was developed by James Clerk Maxwell. And it determines the speed of light. I think personally that's probably one of the most important equations ever discovered. And that equation goes like this. The speed of light equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. So if we can change these properties of space, we can change the maximum speed of light. So what these guys are claiming is that these materials, they have been able to reduce permittivity and permeability to 0. And what does that mean? That's a big deal, because the smaller those two get, the faster the speed of light becomes. So if you go to 0, well, it goes infinitely fast. So now you have a material that they're claiming, and it's on ResearchGate. I'm not making this up. It's out there on the internet. Everything I found is on the internet. And ResearchGate and these places, they're claiming that the speed of light is going infinitely fast in this material. And they make their arguments because of the way the material behaves when they shine light on it. It's like the light is everywhere at once. And so I says, haha, this is what we need to build a Stargate right here. Sure enough, this actually exists. So I got what I said in the beginning of my chapter. It says something's going to have to go faster than the speed of light. Well, now I got it. So now what you do is you put this material, this fractal lens material, all around the perimeter of the Stargate. And then you use it to create the frequency. You don't have to drop the permeability and permittivity to 0. You could just reduce it some, which will give you now a speed faster than the speed of light. So you tune this device like you would tune a radio. And, you know, having enough physicists there and enough mathematicians using this new set of equations, because now you have to realize the speed of light isn't constant anymore. And so you have to adjust the equations as we have with this new function. And then it will say, well, it's possible to go backward in time and forward in time and go into other dimensions and other physical locations within our galaxy or within our universe by simply tuning space using this material and this technology. So I believe that we are doing this, and there are people that claim that time is being adjusted. I don't know if you're familiar with the Mandela.
I've heard of the Mandela effect. For
Right.
those of our viewers who flesh it out a little bit for us.
Well, if you were to go back in time and mess with something,
Yeah.
your memories would change. The facts in the textbooks would change. But for some people, they claim they have memories of something that happened that when they go and look now, it's different. Like Mandela. They claim he died in the 1980s, and these people have memories of his wife making a speech and all this stuff. But that doesn't exist now. So that's how the whole Mandela effect got started. And there's people claiming that texts and books have been changed and so forth. They remember it this way, but now it's different. So that's the Mandela effect. So if we could do this, and I think it's very dangerous, and I'm speaking directly to the U.S. government, please stop. Don't do it. Because if somebody else gets this technology, it could lead to something called time wars, and that could be completely disastrous to the world as we know it. So, you know, I have to say, in one respect, nostalgically, would I love to go back and visit my childhood? You betcha I would. But I could, just like in the movie Back to the Future, you would go back with your body as it is aged now in present time. So you couldn't go back and be a kid again, but you could go back and see yourself as a kid again and be in that time. But it's a dangerous thing to do. And
But
I
you could
highly,
actually, of course, it's dangerous. You could actually eliminate your own existence. For if you go back, what's that other theory? If you go back and kill your grandfather, then you were never born.
right.
And it's uh,
It's very
and
paradoxical. It's not comfortable to think about. Infinity is not comfortable to think about, but yeah, I I think it is possible to do it though, and it
you sometimes wonder if when you have uh, what they call deja vu, you think you've done something before. Maybe perhaps there was a ripple in time, and you have done it before, and it's just being readjusted to the present moment or something along that line. It's a fascinating, you
well,
know.
I'm going to give you because let's talk about time for a minute because time really isn't real, but it's real here because we have a real. It's more evidence that we have a real physical space.
Right.
If space wasn't a real physical thing, it would take no time to traverse it. But we don't see that. If I, put a meter stick out in outer space and I shoot a light beam across it, it takes so much time to get across it. If space wasn't there at all, as many scientists say, if it was made of nothing, it would take zero time to traverse that distance. It would take zero time to get from the sun, light from the sun to us. But that's not what happens. So we experience time here because there's distance. Distance equals rate times time. That formula works because there's a real distance. And Einstein even says that in his Leiden speech. He says, hey, the ether really does exist. In the end of his life, he was convinced that the ether does exist. And that's the reason we have time and distances and measurements and things make sense in our physical reality. It's because there is a physical space.
Right.
So
It's fascinating stuff. Let's go a little bit further into. You've got some interesting stories to tell about um, psychics. You had an encounter with a psychic that told you
many,
in advance. Many. How did you get
many.
involved with psychics? How did that happen?
Well, yeah. Well, the first one, let's go to the first one because that's really kicks off all this stuff. So now we're traveling in parallel with the actual physical things that got me in, like Einstein and the math experiment and all that stuff. But in parallel, actually, before those events happened, when I was 20 years old, me and a friend called Jeff Jones, we went on a little adventure with a bunch of guys. We went to a town called Casadega. You ever hear of that town?
No, I have not. Where is it?
I guess only people in Florida know about this town.
I'm
It's
familiar with Florida. I mean, I have relatives who live, not too far from, like Winter Haven, and I've got a
that's where
family
I'm at, Winter Haven. Yeah,
that lives outside of Orlando, and it's why. But not. I've never heard of that town. No.
it's the North American spiritualist capital. It's a town loaded with psychics. And
Okay.
so I heard about this in a lecture when I was going to the Polk Community College, and I said, "Wow, that sounds cool. I'm going to go up there and get my fortune told." Just a kid wanting to have some fun, do a little adventure. So me and a bunch of guys went up there. It was in October, and it was a blustery, rainy kind of day. It was real spooky weather. And we went up to this town. You go into this town, and it feels different. It's strange. It's like you're stepping back in time. And it was real quiet, but the wind was blowing. And while we pulled over and we were talking, a tree branch blew off this tree and hit our friend's car. And they said, "We're getting out of here." And they said, "We're going to go ahead to Daytona." And they left me and Jeff, to find a psychic because the two of us were really interested in that. So we started knocking on doors, and people would come to look through the blinds, shut the blinds, and then walk off and not answer the door. So we had a couple of those happen. Then we found this lady. Her name was Martha McKay. She had a little tiny, cute little sign, psychic. We knocked on the door. She opened it up. She let us in. And she gave us, it was like $20. It was ridiculously cheap. our readings is what they call it. They don't really like to call it fortunes or whatever. So I went first, and then Jeff went after me. And I had a totally normal reading, and everything she said in that reading, everything came true. She didn't miss one thing. The first thing she said to me was, which I heard from other psychics years later, is, in your final days, you will be a spiritual teacher. And I said, well, okay, I don't really know that much about it. I was just an ordinary kid, not particularly religious or anything. And then she went on and told me about my life, and I would get married, have 2 children. I did get married, just a couple of years later, had 2 children. She told me I would get into electronics. She didn't even really know how to describe what she was seeing. She said, I see you surrounded in wires and cables coming down. And years later, I did work in a place where there was cables and wires and computers all around me. And that's what she was seeing when I was in that spot. And I looked around and I said, oh, this is what she saw. She couldn't describe it. It is weird looking because I'm inside it was like a machine, but it was really just like a dozen computers that were all around me. I was doing all this testing, and I was sitting inside of this thing I built with, like 8 or 10 computers, and they were all running programs and doing testing and everything. So everything she said came true, and it was normal. And then Jeff went in, he had his, and everything was fine. Nothing strange happened there. But when we got in the car and we drove off and we we're going to Daytona and we we're talking about our experiences, how she told us about our spirit guides, which is very interesting. He mentioned to me, well, that's really something about you, Mark. And I said, what are you talking about? I had like a really normal, nothing unusual experience when I was in there with her. Well, she told me that someday you're going to be famous and you're going to make a discovery. And I says, what? She didn't mention that to me. Why didn't she mention that to me? Well, I figured the best I could figure was I would have asked a lot more questions. And then I would have started digging around places where I really didn't. There's only so much they need to tell you. Otherwise, they pollute your future.
Right.
So, so I thought about that. And this, over the years, when I had troubles with marriage in the future, I had some problems with that marriage. I asked Martha, would I have a happy marriage? And she got silent. And then she went like this. That's all she would say. So I'm thinking to myself, that's not a really great big yes there, she's saying yes, but I get the feeling that somebody's telling her, don't tell him, he's got to go through it. So I said, oh, well, yeah, she did say yes, so I let it go. But sure enough, that didn't work out. That marriage didn't work out. And so years later, during that time, I want to relay this other psychic's message, because she also says to me, the first thing we do when we sit down, it's me and my wife now in Charlotte, North Carolina, probably a good 10 or so years after that first reading. And she says to me that you will be a spiritual teacher in your final days. And I says, well, that's interesting, because that's what the other one said. So obviously they're talking to somebody over there who's knows something. And then she goes about telling me that your mother hears you when you're praying at night, and she's sitting in the chair that you asked her to sit in. And that's exactly what I did. And nobody knew. I never spoke that aloud. Not even my wife knew that. There was no way she could look that up. And I didn't ask that question. It just came out of her. And I'm saying, my jaw dropped.
I bet.
I do. I lay in bed at night. I'm talking to my mother who's passed away, or, praying, just telling her how my day went and everything. And I asked her to sit in that golden yellow chair. And this lady knew that. Obviously, she's actually talking to my mother. My mother is not dead. People do not die. They go on.
Correct.
So,
especially if you're a person of faith, that.
Yes, that's knowledge. This is not something I believe. This is knowledge. I've had evidence, lots of it, proven to me over the years. So I no longer just believe it. I know it for sure. And so there was that incident. And there was also another one in between those two where a psychic came to Polk Community College, and he wrapped himself with all kinds of tape, and he was doing a demonstration, and he took pieces of paper with our questions on it. And I asked about this future technology thing. And with him blindfolded, he got my name, he got the question, and then he answered, well, the question was, will I discover something or will I invent something? And he says, yes, but it'll take a lot longer than you think. And so, and there's more, but that's basically how the psychic or the spiritual side of this thing happens. There's a parallel story running along with my research, along with this spiritual connection as well.
Now, you've been, it says here, visited by guardian angels.
Yeah. Along that line, again, there's more evidence that comes in that there's an existence. There's another realm, the heavenly realm, as you might want to call it. And we all have guardian angels. And that's my message right there for everyone. Everyone on this planet, 8 billion people, I don't care whether you believe it or not, everybody has spirit guides. And they're assigned to us right before we're born. And that's part of the agreement. You come down, you have a life plan, and the more you execute that life plan, the more successful you are in life, whatever that life plan is.
Right.
But since you have free will, it's up to you to remember and find that path. And so, yeah, after my divorce, I was tremendously depressed and frightened and living in an apartment by myself. And I would pray a lot, trying to get through all that time. And my prayers were starting to actually be answered. It's very unusual, like
Yeah.
like asking for help and such. And one night I woke up, but sometimes when I wake up, there's this kind of I don't know how to describe it. It's like a buzzing sound, and it's like half my brain is awake because I'm able to look around and see things, but I have this funny feeling and I feel tingly sensations. So I'm in this state. So I know, because this has happened several times before, just to be quiet, be calm, don't be frightened, and just listen and see if you can hear or see anything. And I could see these golden like lights moving around the room. And suddenly my hand's out in front of me like this as I'm lying in bed, and I feel somebody squeeze my hand. And then I hear something, but I can't make out what it's saying. It sounds very metallic. It's like zing, 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 zing. And then I feel my hand get squeezed again. Then I hear zing, 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 zing. And they squeeze the third time, and I'm saying, calm down, just listen. And then it goes from being metallic and distorted to words. And as after they squeeze my hand, I hear, did you feel that? Did you feel that? And so I know telepathically, I don't have to speak. I said, in my head, it says, yes, I can feel that. I can feel that. So why did that happen? Because that night, as I was going to sleep, I said, I need a sign. Can you just tell me that things are going to be all right? All right. Are you really there? Are there really guardian angels and such? That prayer was answered, and they came to me that night and gave me this evidence so I was able to use 3 senses: sight, sound, and physical touch to experience something more than what we normally experience, something that's there, that's real, that's normally just beyond where we can see and hear. They're living in a dimension that's parallel to us, the heavenly realm. It's really a parallel dimension. And so they were giving me signs that they exist, and I'm here, and, they're helping. And we just got to learn to listen better. So that's just one. I've had others. So actually, in one case, let me tell you this one case, they helped me tell the future. So you're interested in time. And And I remember falling asleep that night thinking, how can you tell the future? It just doesn't seem possible. And actually, I got two stories.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I want to hear 'em.
these are good stories. How can that happen? So I fall asleep and I have this dream, and it was not like my normal dream. My normal dreams are very vague and grayish and not a whole lot of color. This one was in color. It was very lucid. It was and it was a simple dream. I'm driving to work. I park in the parking lot at work at IBM. I get out of my car. I walk, and as I walk, I look down, and I look before, and I see this golden sunrise happening. And I look down and I see this shiny dime, heads up, laying on a white stripe in the parking lot. And then I wake up. And I said, well, that was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was all about. And I fell back to sleep and forgot about it. So, okay, next day happens. I'm walking into work and I park in random spots, wherever is open. And I'm walking in and I see that golden sunshine from that morning. I said, this is familiar. I've seen this before. This just looks right. Then I'm walking, I look down and I see the shiny silver dime heads up on the white stripe. And I said, holy cow, I had this dream last night. I remember this. So I took the dime in and told my office mate, I said, this is a miracle. You can tell the future. And so he drilled a little hole. I have it it's a necklace in the other room. And so, again, they took the time for whatever reason. It was important that I know that they're real and that this is possible. This is really happening. And so they gave me more help. And the biggest one happened. It was very dramatic. And they saved my life. I have two guardian angels, a male and a female. The male's in charge of making sure I don't exit early. We all have that. And then the other one is more of a spiritual guide. The female is more of a spiritual guide. So I'm driving, and that's what the psychics told me. So I'm driving to work driving home from work one day, and I hit this T intersection. And I have to decide.
Oh, boy.
I have to decide going left goes through the quiet roads, takes a little longer, but it's more peaceful drive. Or I go right and I go through the shortcut, a lot of traffic, much more hectic. Don't like that way. I'm almost always go left. So as I'm getting up to the road, I'm thinking, I'm going to go left today. And then I hear in my left ear, don't go that way. I turn around, I look, because I'm not talking about I hear a voice in my head. It's like somebody was right next to my ear and speaking. So I said, that couldn't be real. So I continue driving. Then I hear it again. Don't go that way. And so what did I do? What do you think I did, David?
I'm hoping you listened to the voice in your ear and didn't go that way.
No, I went that way.
Oh, you went that way.
Can you imagine how frustrating that must be for them? I apologized to them when I got home because I did go that way. I'm thinking, well, okay, there's something dangerous going to happen. So I'm going to be looking ahead, looking for some sort of a head-on collision. But I'm a scientist kind of guy. I got to know what just happened was real.
Right.
So like a fool, I went that way. And about 3/4 of the way home, all of a sudden, I'm trying to stay behind a big truck thing, but that didn't work out because he bailed out. And coming up ahead, I see this truck swerving wildly. I mean, it's cutting across lanes. People are steering and going into ditches, and he's going back and forth like he's trying to hit somebody. And all of a sudden, he's coming at me. So I hit the wheel, and I'm turning, and I go off into a ditch, and we miss by this much. This guy goes screaming by me and spins out and then stops in the middle of the road. And I says, well, I guess next time I hear a voice that says, don't go that way, I'm going to listen to that voice. And, I scolded myself all the way home. You stupid. Yeah. But it's just because I had to know, that science part of me had to know what was happening was real. I was looking for evidence. Well, I got it. And almost died.
Did we
But
ever find out what happened with the truck driver? Why was he driving like that? Or
no, everybody was all over the place, and then we just got back on the road and left, and that guy got back on the road. I don't know what happened, what caused him to drive like that, why he lost control. But yeah, I don't. But the point is, the future can be seen,
yeah.
and it's as if they were above in a helicopter, and they could see the whole landscape all at once, and they knew that guy was going to do that right where he was, and they knew I was going to be in that area, so they had to make sure I didn't go in that area. Unfortunately,
So the guardian angel that was in charge of making sure that you didn't die young, saved your life despite getting that warning.
Well, it changed my behavior.
Yeah.
I was looking ahead instead of daydreaming or something. I might have been caught off guard and hit him head on. So it was just enough, because he didn't say anything else after I made the decision to go that way. I heard nothing more. I didn't hear anybody yelling, "You idiot, stop, turn around."
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is evidence that there is an afterlife. This is evidence there is a God. There is a Jesus. We need to really start thinking about that again in the world and start getting back on that course, because the creator is what created this universe, and that's why my theory is an intelligent design theory.
I didn't know what to expect when we started this interview, but I got to tell you, Mark, you're one of the best guests I've ever had the pleasure of having on.
Oh, thank you.
Provided me some incredible, and my viewers, some incredible information here. If you would, please put the book back up, if you would, so you can see it. It's called Master of Reality. It's available at Amazon.com and on your website, www.super-relativity.com. You can also check out Mark's blog, which is at the same website, super-relativity.com/blog. Mark, I want to thank you for coming on the program, and I hope we can do it again real soon. I mean, because I just wow. I mean, you sent chills up my spine with some of the things that
this is good news for everybody. I want everybody to know that you have access to this special powers, or special gifts that God is giving us. Life is a gift. Use it wisely, so when you return, you give that gift back, and it's a beautiful gift. It's up to you people out there to do that all for yourselves.
I'll tell you one thing before we leave the discussion today. I once actually thought about becoming a psychic, but I didn't see any future in it. So anyway, we'll leave it at that.
That's a good one.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, bye-bye.